Okay, so good morning, everybody. We're continuing our journey through the liturgy of Shabbat, and today we are starting a new unit. It's the unit of Pesukei Dezimra for Shabbat. Just kind of like a little bit to put things in perspective, we spoke about the units that precedes that unit, i.e. Birkot HaShachar, the morning blessings. We spoke about the Korbanot. We spoke about all this idea of basically what are the themes over there. It's the idea of gratitude, not to take things for granted. This is basically the attitude that these are the themes that we see coming from the morning blessings, from blessings like Asher Yatzar, like Elohai, Neshama Shanatata Bi, all those blessings that tell us basically we should have a certain attitude towards life, obviously gratitude towards God and all the everyday miracles. And of course, we need to be involved with the study of Torah. This is why we have Birkot HaTorah over there. Why we have because the study of Torah is not something intellectual only, it's not supposed to stay in the Beit HaMidrash, but rather it's supposed to inspire us into our daily actions, set up the kind of the environment in which we operate and do our daily activities. Okay, so these are, and we spoke very, very kind of briefly last time on this unit of the Korbanot, saying basically that the somewhere in medieval times, Hasidei Ashkenaz, that practice, we start to see that the recitation / learning of the text, the biblical passages that talk about the korbanot, the sacrifices, are something that penetrating our service, something that becomes part of the service. The idea, there's a concept that is called unshalma parim sfatenu, that our safa, sfatenu, our lips, our language, our words substitute the animal sacrifices. Okay, and therefore we can see after the biblical passages, we see a supplication, some sort of a little prayer that says, may it be your will, God, blah, blah, blah. That just like I learned those verses of the sacrifices, it will be considered as if I brought those korbanot, those sacrifices. Okay, so this idea of, and again, that's part of the Torah study that is woven into our daily services. Yes, Maxine.
Isn't it true that we did not do sacrifices? We copied the prayer. That's what I heard.
I don't know.
But then I must be wrong.
I do know what the Rambam talks about. The Rambam said it very, very clearly that the practice of the ancient world was human sacrifices. And the Torah was very, very clear. That's a big no-no. We're not going to do that. And therefore replacing that with animal sacrifices, which was the method, the mean, the vehicle through which people felt they could connect spiritually. That was right for that time, that point of history. There's obviously a debate what's going to happen in the third temple. We're not going to solve that debate today. But
Hashem us.
Correct. The question is, it's not about what Hashem needs. It's about what do we need. Okay. So that brings us into the unit of Pesukei Dezimra. Now, the unit of Pesukei Dezimra is very well-defined unit. So it starts with a bracha, right, which is rabbinic text, and it ends with a bracha, which is also a rabbinic text. Okay, while in the middle we have biblical text. Now, this practice of having a rabbinic text before and after, it makes no difference, by the way. Yeah. It's just not yet. We will. This practice of taking a biblical text and putting rabbinic text prior and after is something that is very common. We're going to see that throughout the tefillah. For example, the Shema, right? So the Shema, we know it comes from the Torah, right? All the three sections of the Shema. However, we have two blessings of Yotzer Or and Ahava Rabba, or in the evening, Ma'ariv Aravim and Ahavat Olam, and the blessing after, which is the blessing of redemption. Okay, so we have biblical text in the middle, kind of a sandwich. Okay, or for example, Hallel. Right, so Hallel are chapters from these are Psalms, basically, but we have a bracha in the beginning and a bracha at the end. Yahlelucha. That's rabbinic, which, by the way, is kind of like this concept is kind of part of the discussion of what happens in Sephardic tradition. Ashkenazi, that's the debate between the Sephardim and Ashkenazim. What do you do with Hallel without a bracha? So in Sephardic tradition, you can say Hallel without a bracha. Sometimes, not any, it's or forget about Sephardic tradition. But for example, the debate that we have for Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim in some communities, right? So some authorities, some rabbis said, well, say Hallel, but without a bracha on Yom Ha'atzmaut, right? Why? Because it's not in the books. Yom Ha'atzmaut is not one of those. It's not the Shulchan Aruch doesn't talk about that. Oh, whatever. So we don't have really the authority to do that, to add. So you do that without a bracha. Okay, that was also the opinion of Rav Soloveitchik. However, the counter argument is we don't have such a thing as Hallel without a bracha. Hallel without a bracha is not Hallel. It's just the verses from Tehillim.
Actually, it's reading that we go over with tefillah, and I find that their tefillah there's a lot more of like Shabbat Avodah Hashem. That's the major difference that I have observed. The meaning of the word Hallel, which is
Shevach.
Amazing to me. Like every Hashem is twice as long, and what's twice as long? It's Shabbat Avodah Hashem.
Right. Okay, so we have this practice. It's all over in our liturgy that we have rabbinic text before and after, and kind of like the unit, which is the biblical passages, are kind of this, it's a sandwich. Fine. Why am I saying that? Because Pesukei Dezimra is the same thing. Now, if we look at Pesukei Dezimra, and again, I said it many times, if you want to look at something, then you need to look at its thinnest, most concise version, right? And Pesukei Dezimra, what happens? It's the most concise version of them is the weekdays, not Shabbat. Shabbat is expanded. Okay, so we're going to talk about that in a second. But if you look at the weekday, you don't have to flip the pages. The weekday version of Pesukei Dezimra, you will see that there's a bracha, there's Baruch Shamar. That's the opening bracha. Then you have a closing bracha, which is Yishtabach. Fine. Same goes to Pesukei Dezimra of Shabbat. However, what happens in between is expanded. We have more chapters of Tehillim. Now we're going to go through all that stuff and understand what's going on with them. But, so I want you to look at page 399. Actually, just to put things in perspective, the end of, let's go to page 57, I'm sorry, first.
67.
Okay, so page 57 is the end, it's the Rabbi's Kaddish. And that's the end of the previous unit, right? So we had the unit of Korbanot and all that stuff. And we end that section, how? With the Rabbi's Kaddish. Why? Well, as we said many times, the functionality of the Kaddish is to separate the different units, the different parts of the service. Now, which Kaddish? It depends on what's going on. Okay, but all the Kaddishim have the same basic functionality, which is separating the different parts of the service. Okay? Now, what happened here? We just had Torah study. Okay, and the last part of the Torah study is the principles of Rabbi Ishmael. All right, so this is taken from the Tosefta, is the 13 principles by which we study Torah as laid out by Rabbi Ishmael. Okay. It's a form of Torah study. We have biblical passages, we have Mishnah, we have Tosefta, whatever. It's Torah study. And therefore, the Kaddish that comes after Torah study is what we call the Rabbi's Kaddish, Kaddish de Rabbanan. What makes it the Kaddish de Rabbanan? What makes it the Rabbi's Kaddish? It's that famous line on page 59 on the top. Al Yisrael ועל רבנן ועל תלמידי הון ועל כל תלמידי תלמידי הון ועל כל מאן דעסקין באורייתא די ואתרא הדין ודי וכל אתר ואתר. On Israel, to Israel, to the teachers, their disciples and their disciples' disciples, and to all who engage in the study of Torah in this place or elsewhere, may there come to them and to you great peace, grace, kindness, and compassion, long life, ample sustenance, and deliverance from their Father in heaven. That is the line that is what makes it into the Rabbi's Kaddish. There's a blessing for the Torah scholars and those who study Torah, etc. So we understand why the Rabbi's Kaddish appears at that point, because we're moving to the next unit. Now, let's go back to our page, which is 399. Thank you, Maxine. And you see, so we expect to go what? Into Pesukei Dezimra. Well, guess what? And here at the Koren, they called a psalm before verses of praise. Mizmor lifnei Pesukei Dezimra. How do they call it, by the way, in the art scroll? I don't know. I think they just, yeah. Okay, introductory. What is going on here? Why the Pesukei Dezimra need an introduction? And why this particular psalm, Psalm 30, is the introduction? Why do we have it here to start with? And why not as part of the unit? Why do we need this introduction? Okay, so this has to do both theological reason and historical reason. Okay, the best way is to skip for a second. Go to the bracha. The bracha of Baruch Shamar. Go to page 405 on the top, the second part of the bracha. Fourth line. So we have described, we describe, blessed are you, Lord our God, actually King of the universe, God, compassionate Father, exalted by the mouth of his people, praised and glorified. And here's the crucial line, by the tongue of his devoted ones and those who serve him. Okay, sorry, here's the crucial part. With the songs of your servant David, we will praise you, O Lord our God. So in this opening blessing, what do we say? So we're going to praise you, God. How we're going to do that? We're going to use the words of King David, i.e. mainly Tehillim. It's going to get us into trouble later on also again. So I'm just giving you a heads up. But it's through the songs of David, King David. Okay, have that in mind. Now, let's go back to Psalm 30. Psalm 30 is the songs of, it's the words of King David. So it shouldn't be any problem to be part of Pesukei Dezimra. Okay. Pesukei Dezimra, we need to understand, went through a process. Okay? It's a unit that grew and grew and grew and grew and grew with time. In the beginning, it looks that was only the last two chapters of Tehillim, okay? Psalm 149, 150, together with the Ashrei. That's it. As, by the way, the Ashrei is, we'll get there, but just giving you a heads up, the Ashrei is composed of 2 verses and then Psalm 145, 2 verses from other Psalms. Therefore, the Talmud calls it Tehillah LeDavid, because the Tehillah LeDavid, which is actually in the 3rd verse of the Ashrei, is where Psalm 145 starts. It starts from Tehillah LeDavid. Okay, so there's different theories why and when those 2 verses were added. We'll talk about that when we get there, but it's definitely the original form was Psalm 145, which Tehillah David. So it was this plus 149 and 150. And then they added the other hallelujahs. Okay. And then they added, I think first was Hodu, and then Vayvarech David, and then, all sort of like, additional and additional sections until it was the way we know it. Shirat Hayam, for example, is one of the later additions to that unit. The Rambam doesn't really mention that. He says there's kind of like a custom to some people to recite Shirat Hayam also, was not like part of the, okay. Somewhere in the 1700s, something like that, we start seeing a practice of individuals, I think it started in Italy, that reciting this psalm, I'm sorry, during Pesukei Dezimra. What's the rationale? Well, the claim is this: if you are really doing things right, if you are reciting / learning the korbanot, the previous unit, in depth, you're really engaged in that, then it's very depressing. Why? Because it's a reminder that we don't have Beit HaMikdash. We cannot do all that stuff. It reminds you the exile, it reminds you of the reality. Things are hard. Things are difficult. We're depressed, all that kind of stuff. Now, you want me to immediately go into Pesukei Dezimra, which is what? Verses of praise. Not only that, the rabbis tell us the Zimra comes from the word zemer, songs. According to some authorities, you need to do it with melody. You have to do it with joy. That shift is too radical. I can't. If you're really engaged in what you do, one Kaddish in between is not going to be enough. I'm not there mentally. I need a buffer. Something that's going to be a transition. And what is that? It's this Psalm 30. Look at what the last, I mean, the whole Psalm, you can read it, but the last line says, Hafachta mispedi lemacholi, pitachta saki v'ta'ezreni simcha. You have removed my sackcloth and clothed me with joy, so that my soul may sing to you and not be silent. What is the context of this psalm? So after King David is with Bathsheba, now everybody knows the second son that they have together. That's Shlomo HaMelech, that's King Solomon. However, they had the first son. That son dies as an infant. And King David is in tremendous mourning, actually, until the death of the child. He is wearing a sackcloth and is not interested in being part of society and whatever. And Yoav, the Sar HaTzava, the general, comes to him and he said, pull yourself together. You're the king. You gotta go out and whatever. And nothing happens, but eventually when the baby dies, only then King David says, okay, fine, there's nothing I can do anymore. And he gets up and he moves on. According to tradition, at that time, he composed that psalm. And so the message, Hafachta mispedi lemacholi, you removed my sackcloth and clothed me with joy, is kind of the bridge that we need from the depression, from the kind of a gloomy mode that we are, because of the constant reminder that Beit HaMikdash no longer exists and things are hard and all that kind of stuff. However, we're inspired by King David. We look at what he did. He was able to get up and move on with life and blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. And we take inspiration from that. And that's supposed to kind of create some of a bridge so we can get into Pesukei Dezimra. Okay, that's kind of the rationale behind this. And this practice has started developing. And what happens, here is a huge debate between the Ashkenazim and the Sephardim about this mizmor. So the Sephardim says, okay, we get it. It's a good transition. It becomes part of the practice. Fine, let's put it as part of Pesukei Dezimra. At the end of the day, remember the bracha that we just talked about, Baruch Shamar, it says, Ufshirei David Avdecha. It's the songs of King David. So what's the problem? We added other sections throughout the years. Why not another mizmor? Big deal. So indeed, in the Sephardic tradition, in Nusach Sfard, the Hasidic, whatever, it's the same. That's the way it is. You have Baruch Shamar, and then you have Mizmor Shir Chanukat HaBayit after Baruch Shamar. However, in Nusach Ashkenaz said, no. This is the unit. It's defined as the unit. We don't change that. But we do recognize the need for this mizmor, for this psalm, and therefore we're going to put it before the bracha to show that this is a later addition. This is not part of, it didn't make the cut. Okay, it didn't make the cut when the Shulchan Aruch kind of. Fine. So this is what they put it before, and in order to show that it's not really from the original whatever unit of Pesukei Dezimra, what we're going to do, we're going to separate it. How we're going to separate? It's supposed to know by now. It's a Kaddish. Now, if you look here on page 401, you'll see that this time it's a mourner's Kaddish. Okay. So we understand the need to have a Kaddish because it's a sign that we separate the things. Why this time it's a mourner Kaddish? Okay, so we have, again, every time, by the way, we look in Tefillah, we have theological reasons and we have historical reasons, pretty much for everything. So what's the theology / halacha, whatever that happens? It's a public recitation of Tehillim. After the public recitation of Tehillim, usually there's a Kaddish, and not only that, usually, if it doesn't follow, if it's not part of the service, it's going to be Kaddish Yatom. Here is another example, Kabbalat Shabbat. Right? Kabbalat Shabbat is a collection of mizmorim, of Tehillim, and at the end of them, after Psalm 93, it's a mourner's Kaddish. Right? Because we did a Kaddish before moving to the next unit, which is Torah study. And since it's a public recitation of Tehillim or biblical passages, it's the mourner's Kaddish. Okay? We don't do that in Pesukei Dezimra because Pesukei Dezimra goes into the next unit. It goes into, continues the service. Anyway, so that's the theological halachic explanation. The historic reason behind this Kaddish is somewhat different. So believe it or not, some people are late to shul, even then. And believe it or not, some people are early to leave shul, even back then. I run the 6 a.m. minyan every morning, and I have a couple of guys that, together with David, my Maxine's son, and we have a couple of guys that at 6:35, they got to be out. I mean, we finish at 6:40, the latest. So what's the big deal? No, they got to be out, right? You know, some people need, in New York, it was like the excuse was like, I need to catch a train. Here, we don't have trains so much, but whatever, beat the traffic, whatever that is. Believe it or not, that it's not a new thing. Fine. What happened with people who say Kaddish? Mourners who say Kaddish. So the rabbi said, okay, some of them are going to be late to shul. So let's put the Kaddish at the end of the service. So they're not going to miss the Kaddish. However, some people cut the last part of the service and they leave early. So for those, what we're going to do, we're going to put a Kaddish at the beginning of the service. On the other, no, the contrary. Yeah, the practice today is to do both, but from Ikar Adin is to have one Kaddish a day, and then it became like one Kaddish per service, per tefillah. Some people, by the way, you'll notice that if they're not a mourner, so for example, they say a Kaddish on behalf of a relative, a friend, whatever, they'll be makpid on that to say only one Kaddish, or not all the Kaddishim, just to show that you do only the Ikar Adin, because there's a difference between that and when you have the chiyuv on a parent or somebody. Whatever. This is all called little details. Okay. So we understand we have why in the Ashkenazi Nusach we have Psalm 30, and then we have the mourner's Kaddish, which takes us finally to this blessing that's called Baruch Shama. So, a lot of yeah.
I think I know a little bit about it, but I don't understand the first person that start. What does it mean and who did say? Who said Baruch Shama? והיה עולם ברוך, ברוך עושה בראשית, all of this.
So,
First to what, to who does this belong? And who put it?
so okay. So, like most of our tefillot, this was written by Anshe Knesset Agdola, but they are addressing the Baruch, right? Kadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch she'amar v'haya ha'olam.
So this is my problem.
So here's the thing. Here's the explanation. God who said, and the world was created. And that is based on the it's a famous saying in the Talmud, Be'asara ma'amarot nivra ha'olam. Right? That the world was created in 10 utterance, 10 mini speeches, sayings, whatever. What is it referring to? It referring to Vayomer Elohim yehi or. Vayomer Elohim naaseh adam etzalmenu. Vayomer Elohim tadsheh haaretz deshe eseb. Vayomer 10 times in the story of creation, we read Vayomer Elohim. And God said, blah, 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 blah. Right? So 10 times it appears there. And the Talmud says, with 10 speeches, 10 times that God spoke, the world was created. That's the story of creation, right? So this is a reference to that. What do we know? How do we know it? No. God doesn't say that things. God says, Vayomer Elohim yehi or. Vayomer Elohim naaseh adam. Vayomer Elohim tadsheh haaretz deshe eseb. Vayomer Elohim, whatever, right? So the concept is, because God said, the world was created. That's Chumash Bereshit. That's the beginning of Chumash, right? That's the beginning of Bereshit. Yes? Okay. Now, many, many years later, right, Anshe Knesset Agdola, the end of the Second Temple time, they come and they compose a bracha. So far, so good. And they take that concept that God said something and the world was created 10 times. God had to speak. And they put a bracha around that, or at least the beginning of it. So they say Baruch, meaning God. God is referred to as the Baruch, the blessed, right? She'amar, who spoke, v'haya olam, and the world was created.
This is that I know it's saying, but I don't understand how do we know that this is what God said?
No, that's not what God said. This is the reference to God. God is called here as the one who said. It's not what he said. What he said is the story of creation. He said yehi or. But he is referred to, he is called as the one who said. What he said? Go to the book of Genesis. Make sense? Okay. So, he said, whatever he said, and the world was created. That's what we say. Now, interestingly, by the way, I'm blanking now on the source. I think it is a Yerushalmi, but I'm not 100% sure. That says that there was a practice I'm blanking on the details, to recite it b'tzibur in a different, meaning in a minyan, in a slightly different way. Meaning that the Chazan used to say, Baruch Shamar V'haya Olam, congregation answers, Baruch Hu. And they say Baruch Oseh Bereshit, and the congregation answers Baruch Hu. Baruch Omer ve'oseh, Chazan, congregation Baruch Hu. There's interestingly, in the new conservative Siddur called Lev Shalem, not so new, whatever. I don't remember when it was published. They brought back that practice, and they put it there that way for other reasons, obviously, because people can't handle the whole text. So they say, okay, it's going to be kind of, yeah, it's more participatory, whatever. But they brought back that ancient tradition. Yes, Shoshana.
It just shows the greatness of God that he produced ex nihilo, basically. Yesh me'ayin.
Correct.
That's the
Correct.
Sheva.
Yeah, for sure.
So
For
what
sure.
can't we
That's the
understand?
whole. That's the whole concept of bria, and that's what we say. Only God is capable of creating yesh me, right, something from nothing. Okay. So there's another tale in the Talmud. I don't remember the source. Maybe Rabbi Sachs is talking here about that in the footnotes or something. I don't know. No, that the version of this came from heaven, written on a scroll, kind of flew, to Ansei Knesset Agdala of Baruch Shamar. There's all sorts of midrashim, all sorts of stuff that appeared. Just wanted to put it out there. As you can see, there's it's also like Baruch. How many times did we see the word Baruch here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. 13 times the word Baruch. And if the word Baruch is no references, no, it refers exactly. No, not Shlosha Sarikarim. You were close. It's to the 13 midot of the Rachamim.
Yeah.
Why? Because if you refer to God as the Baruch, and God is defined by what? The 13 midot of the Rachamim. The 13 attributes. That one, right? That verse. We refer to God as we can't define God. So refer to God, right? So, so this is like also like some Kabbalistic idea that says that this is why there's 13 times that the word Baruch appears in this bracha. Okay. Yeah, so yes, but by the way, if you look at this, if you look at the first part, look, meaning in this page, which is the first part of the bracha, you see the Baruch is 10 times because it refers to the 10 ma'amarot. It's the 10 times that Vayomer Elohim. Okay, so it's an expansion. Yes, Baruch Shamar B'Haolam. So this is kind of a title. He said, and the world was created, and then Baruch Oseh Bereshit. When we say Bereshit is a reference to usually what? Day one. Day one. Yes. No, for sure. But anyway. A lot of our davening is Tehillim. Okay, so we talked about this bracha, and what happens after that? So after that, we have a long section. It's called Hodu, not the turkey, but from the word lehodot, to think, right? Yeah. It's not exactly. Baruch is blessed. I guess I understand that, and this is you recognize the blessing, and because of that you get it. You go into praise. I get it, but it's a different word. It's a different shorish. Yes, I get it. We bless Hashem. Baruch Hu et Hashem. No. Yeah, we say it all the time. We'll get there. We'll get there. We'll get there. Okay, I wanna get like a little bit into the material that we have in Pesukei Dezimra. This starts a collection of verses. Okay, it's a collection of verses. First from Divrei Hayamim, from Chronicle, first whatever Chronicle 1, whatever they call it, and then a collection of Psukim from Tehillim. Okay, so if you'll see, it switches on page 409 to verses of Tehillim. Now, there was also a debate about this section, whether it should be in or not. The collection of Tehillim, I get it. That's Shirei David. But Chronicles? Well, you got to go into Chronicle 1 and look at that area, and you'll see that these are also the words of King David. King David says all that stuff, it's when he brings the Aron from Giv'on to Yerushalayim. He brings the Ark to Yerushalayim, and this is these are the verses that were composed. Now, the Mishnah refers to that, the Talmud actually, not the Mishnah, refers to that as Shir Shel Tamid. At the end of the service, we have Shir Shel Yom, right? The Psalm of the day, which, according to tradition, was the psalm that the Levites used to sing in Beit HaMikdash. Every day, it was a different song. Every day of the week, every Sunday, every Monday, every Tuesday. This, according to the tradition, so King David composed those verses when he brought the ark to Yerushalayim. The whole description appears in the 6th chapter of Samuel 1. But over there, we don't have the verses themselves. It talks about the story, what happened, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. The verses themselves appears in Chronicles, in the retelling of the story. Terry's checking if it's indeed in the 6th chapter of Samuel. I think maybe it was Samuel 2, though. Maybe it's Samuel 2. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, correct. So, no. On the contrary, I'm happy that you know, you're checking that. I think it's Samuel 2, but it's anyway. So since these are also the words of King David, it made the cut. Now, here's the thing. According to the tradition, why we say it? Because this is called the Shir Shel
Yes.
Tamid. Woo.
2-6, yes.
Wow. Okay, still have my marbles. Shir Shel Tamid. Tamid refers to the Korban Tamid, the daily offerings. And according to tradition, from that time until the temple was built, which is much later in the days of Shlomo HaMelech, those verses were recited by the Levim every day. I'm sorry? Yes, but correct. But there was no Beit Mikdash yet. It was in the Mishkan. Yes. Okay? Korban Tamid. Yeah, the daily offering, the Korban Tamid. So, to kind of commemorate that tradition, because it ceased once Beit HaMikdash was built. Over there was like a whole different rituals and set of how to do things and all that kind. We recite that. Later on is verses from Tehillim, very much like the rest of the now, which takes us to page 411. Yeah, Mizmor LeTodah. Immediately after Hodu, probably by you it's going to be like in gray or something, because this is one. Okay, you went exactly. That's exactly why. Okay, and you know what's interesting? Why it's not in the art scroll, but it's here. You know why? Even though we saw the following psalm is said on Yom Yerushalayim, Yom Ha'atzmaut, it is omitted on Shabbat, because Koren is a very Zionist publication, and therefore they included, because according to some of the customs, on Yom Ha'atzmaut and Yom Yerushalayim, you recite the expanded version of Pesukei Dezimra, i.e., like Shabbat and holidays. But on those days, you do say Mizmor LeTodah, unlike Shabbat and holidays where you omit it. So, Art Scroll is a different edition. I didn't say that, but let's call it not as Zionist as Koren. Koren is also Israeli. And therefore, that practice of adding or reciting the Shabbat version of Pesukei Dezimra on Yom Ha'atzmaut is not something that works for them. And therefore, there's no reason for anyone to recite Psalm 100. By the way, it's not even in Israel, everybody does that. But there's different practices. But the point is, it's anyway. So, yeah. It's fine. Listen, when people, debate about just to say that, not to say that, I'm saying, okay, this is going to be our biggest problem. We're in a great place. So, Mizmor LeTodah, Psalm 100, is one of those things that we skip. On Shabbat, usually we don't skip, we add stuff. However, we skip it. We say it every day during the week. However, we skip it on Shabbat. Why? What's the story with Mizmor? So this Mizmor, this psalm, according to Rashi and many authorities, I don't think it appears in the Talmud, but maybe, I don't remember. This Mizmor was recited while bringing the Korban Todah, the Thanksgiving offering. Now, Thanksgiving offering is an individual Korban. It's not a communal Korban. It's something that individuals brought, right? A voluntarily Korban that you brought. And since it's an individual, it's not a communal Korban. It was not brought on Shabbat. On Shabbat, the only Korbanot that they brought were communal Korbanot, the Tamid and the Musaf. No. Okay? If I had, let's assume I had a healthy baby and I want to bring a Korban Todah, They said to me, okay, you can bring it on Friday, you can bring it on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, not on Shabbat. On Shabbat, because of the restrictions of Shabbat, we do only what is necessary for Shabbat. And since this is not something that you have to do on Shabbat, you can do it on Sunday. It's not a big deal.
Anybody has a simcha, anybody has something to celebrate, it shouldn't diminish it. So he or she, whatever it is, they have the right to celebrate and to understand it and to enjoy it with the rest of the kehillah. And
Okay.
Shabbat, it's for the whole community to get together.
Okay, interesting. Okay, interesting. The practicality of the reason is that, the Torah does not allow to bring private or individual korbanot on Shabbat, only communal ones. Since this is not, we don't bring it on Shabbat. Since we don't bring it on Shabbat, and this mizmor was recited while bringing that korban, we also do not recite that mizmor, that psalm, on Shabbat and holidays. Another day, for example, on which we do not recite it is Erev Pesach. Why don't we recite this on Erev Pesach? Because the Korban Todah is also includes a lot of chametz, a lot of bread. And you can't do that on Erev Pesach. And because of that, Korban Todah was not brought on Erev Pesach, and therefore we do not recite it also on Erev Pesach. The idea of Korban Todah, by the way, it's like I'm going a little bit off track, but it's very interesting. The commentators actually point out that this Korban includes 40 loaves of bread. That's a lot. And the question is, why? And Abu Draham, writing in the early 1400s, that the reason for that is very simple. You can't consume it by yourself. And by the way, you can't prolong it. You can't do that. You have 1 day. You have 1 day to finish it, the korban, the meat and the bread. You have to finish. Nobody can do that. What's the only way you can do that? Make a big party. Call your friends, call your family, whatever, bring everyone. And what happens when you do that? Everybody is aware of the miracle. Everybody is, and by doing that, and you share it with everybody, everybody's aware of the miracle, and God's name become exalted and blessed, because everybody says, oh, Baruch Hashem, that you had this miracle, Baruch, thank God, all that kind of stuff. And it's publicizing the miracle. It's not that you can send an email to all your friends, hey, that's what happened to me today. No. Yeah, you can, but not back then. Right? So what's the way to publicize the miracle? Make a big party out of it. By the way, a remnant of that stuff is our practice today of Birkat HaGomel. So the Mishnah is very clear. There are 4 categories which obligates you to recite Birkat HaGomel, or, right? And it's not only Birkat HaGomel, to express your gratitude, right? The one that crossed the desert, crossed the ocean, somebody who was released from prison, and serious like illness, right? So today we're much more loose, and people recite HaGomel on other things as well, and there's like a whole debate whether you do recite HaGomel when you cross the ocean in airplane or not. It's a whole machloket by itself, whatever. But the idea behind that is, today we don't bring korban, obviously. So what do? We recite Birkat HaGomel. And what is the functionality of Birkat HaGomel? Okay, but when can you do it at your home? No, you have to do it with a minyan. That's the whole point. It's just like, it's the same idea of the korban. You have to do it in public. You have to bring people, to invite people. Here we do it in public. You do it in the shul, in public, Because what? The person said, I had a miracle. Hagomel chayavim tovot shegmalani kol tov. Right? Blessed is God who bestowed all this goodness upon me. And we respond. Shegmalcha kol tov hu yigmalcha kol tov sela. The God, so it's a form of, again, publicizing the miracle and the goodness. And by doing that, God's name is greater in the world. Because that's a custom, that doesn't have a halachic, but it's the same idea. Sudat Hoda'ah is a thanksgiving, right? And it has its roots in this. Correct. From that meal that you had to put together in order to finish 40 loaves of bread. That's a lot of carbs. So on Shabbat, we do not recite that. But during the week, when it's a regular day, since the Korban was brought, and this Mizmor is associated with the Korban, we recite that as a remnant too. Now, take another step. There's a connection also to the miracles that we talked in Birkot HaShachar, recognizing the miracles, the everyday miracles in our lives and all that kind of stuff. It's also a nice connection to this one. So yes, we do not bring a korban. Yes, we do not make a big party because we woke up in the morning. However, we do recognize that, we do give it some sort of, and perhaps that ties into that, the fact that we recite Mizmor LeTodah as a form of thanksgiving as well. By the way, somebody showed me, send me that there's now a, that somebody put it on his alarm clock as a new, the sound that you put on the alarm clock is of applause. You know, I deserve applause just for getting up in the morning. So some people do that. Okay. What happens here, I'm just going to say it like very quickly, so because we're already 12. What happens here, if you look in the next couple of pages, these are Psalm 19, 34. Somebody needs to keep count. Then 90, then 91, and 135, and 136, and 33. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 7 Psalms. Now, if you look, those Psalms are not in the weekday Pesukei Dezimra. We add them only on Shabbat and holidays. 2 ideas behind them. One, again, theological. Exactly. 7, we already know. 7 days of the week. Therefore, each Mizmor, each Psalm represent 1 day of the week. Okay. The other reason is that on during the week we don't have time. Everybody's in a rush. On Shabbat, we have time. We started davening a little bit later. Everything is a little bit slower. We have the opportunity to focus on other things, whatever, all that kind of stuff. Our focus is different. And therefore, we can expand. We have more time, we expand. We add more Tehillim, we praise God a little bit more. So this is why we do that on Shabbat. We don't do it. So, by the way, when we move to the next unit, which is going to be the Shema, inside the bracha, the first bracha, which is the Yotzer, you will see that is also, when comparing that, the Shabbat Yotzer to the weekday Yotzer, you will see that it expands. Okay, there's piyutim, there are poems that were inserted inside the bracha to make it longer, to make it more. Why? Because we can. Because we don't go to work. To try to tell it today to people. You can stay longer in shul. You can daven more. Don't be in a hurry. Yeah, that's not going to fly very well. But in theory, that's the idea of Shabbat. Right? It's not a day that you're supposed to not do things so you can do the other things that you want to do. It's so you can engage more in spiritual matters, more in tefillah, more in learning, more in, there's no obligation to sleep more on Shabbat. A little bit, yeah, but there's the concept of learning more, spiritual matters, deal with. It doesn't say that you have to eat more. It says that you have to eat better food, but not necessarily more. We tend to, but I don't think it's a halachic obligation. Anyway, so we have 7 mizmorim that representing 7 days of the week and all that kind of stuff. Now, just one last point is Mizmor 136. Hodu Hashem ki tov, ki l'olam chasdo. Hodu Elohim, ki l'olam chasdo, etc., etc. 2 points about that. One, scholars believe that this was the way they recited it in Beit HaMikdash, meaning there was either 2 choirs or a soloist and a choir. Okay, so Hodu Hashem ki tov, response ki l'olam chasdo. Okay, so that's one thing. By the way, a remnant of that we have in our Hallel. Hodu Hashem ki tov, and then a congregation repeats ki l'olam chasdo. Yomar na Yisrael ki lo. And the other thing is that this mizmor, by including this mizmor, it makes it what we call Hallel HaMitzri. Because, or the Great Hallel. It's the Great Hallel or the Mitzri Hallel. Why? Because it talks about Lemakem Mitzrayim Bivchorehem, right? The one who smite the Egyptians and took Israel out of that. Biyad Chazaka V'Zroa Netuya. There's a lot of references here to the Exodus. Now, why this is worth mentioning? Why? Because Pesukei Dezimra as a unit, the Talmud calls it Hallel Shebechol Yom, the everyday Hallel. It's a mini Hallel. So we are familiar with the Hallel, the Hallel that we recite on the Chagim, Rosh Chodesh, etc. That's but a mini version of the Hallel, Hallel Shebechol Yom, the daily Hallel, the Talmud refers it as Pesukei Dezimra. Okay, it has that functionality. Where do we have the Hallel HaGadol or Hallel HaMitzri also? Exactly, in the Haggadah. And indeed, in the Haggadah, we do recite Psalm 136. So and that's what gives it its name, because there's a lot of emphasis on the Exodus and what happened in Egypt and all that kind of stuff. This is the Egyptian Hallel or the Great Hallel. Okay? Who is he? King David? Yes. Probably he did. Probably that's the way he wrote it. You got to understand it, that a lot of that stuff were sung already in the Mishkan, right? And you had, so it probably was written already. Look, some of the Psalms already, like, we said, Lamnatzeach halagitit, that kind of stuff, right? So what am Lamnatzeach? Choir master. Why have a choir master? He already had in mind, that type of stuff. A gitit is, there's a debate whether it's an instrument or whether it's a form of singing. Okay, so music was an integral. Look, when the temple was built, it's not that all the music and everything like started from scratch. It was based on something. right? Moshe Bnei Israel, when they crossed the Yam Suf, they sang Shirat Hayam. Okay, they used the tune. Okay, probably was some sort of Egyptian tune that they knew from Egypt and just adopted. Right, we do it all the time. You take a tune, you adapt it to your own lyrics, right? A tradition of music continued in Eretz Israel. It didn't stop, right? There were like stuff that they sang as they brought the korbanot or whatever, or all sorts of occasions, holidays, right? Ma'amad Akel, all that kind of stuff. Stuff happened. So when, obviously, King David composed a lot of new material, not only the lyrics, but probably the melodies as well. Right? We know he was a musician, right? So, oh, that's for technicalities. That's for technicalities. The Gemara talks about, first of all, there's no Isul. I'm going to be very careful how I'm going to phrase that. There's no real prohibition in playing instruments on Shabbat. The problem is, and that's what the Mishnah talks about, Shema Yifka Meitar. Right? We're afraid that one of the strings is going to tear, or something, something is going to happen, and then what? You're going to fix it, and that is not permissible on Shabbat. Yeah, the leaf could break or something, right? A lot of the laws of Shabbat are because it's what we call gderot or siag. Okay, that's a fence that the rabbis made so you're not going to get into the Torah prohibition. Okay, we have it in every aspect of halakha. Kashrut, Shabbat, you name it. Anything, everything. We have a lot of fences around the prohibition to make sure that you're not going to. So this is a good example. And by the way, one of the fundamental differences between Orthodox and conservative, because conservative, and they have also like, it's called Knesset HaRabbanim. It's like the body of the leading conservative rabbis. They get together and they form tshuvot. They write responsa, halach responsa, what is permissible, what is not permissible for the conservative movement. And one of the things that they wrote is that under certain conditions, i.e., with today's instruments that are much more durable and better quality than the ancient times, and with a mechanism that makes sure that you're not going to go and fix it. For example, you have another guitar there. So even if the string, you just take the other guitar, stuff like that. Or when it comes to electronic, like a keyboard and stuff like that, that is, the whole issue is not relevant. Anyway, so they write a whole tshuva, and therefore, under those conditions, it is permissible to use instruments on Shabbat. And indeed, vast majority of the conservative synagogues, they do use instruments on Shabbat. Some of the conservative rabbis did not accept it, by the way. So the very small number of places that still do not allow instruments on Shabbat. But again, mi'ikar hadin, you're allowed to do that. On Beit HaMikdash, they did a lot of things. They brought korbanot, fire, okay? Yeah. They shook the lulav on Beit HaMikdash on Shabbat. So But from the very beginning, the Mishnah talks, there's a major difference between Beit HaMikdash and outside Beit HaMikdash. Okay? In Beit HaMikdash, there was no fear that things are gonna, snowball that could get you to do what you're not supposed to be doing. And there's a different standard between Beit HaMikdash and what you do in your own home. That's the way the halacha. Anyway, next week, same time, same place, we're going to continue, somebody is going to remember, from Psalm 92, Mizmor Shel Yom Shabbat, and we're going to talk, and moving forward with that unit of Pesukei Dezimra.
Thank you. I'm not really happy, sorry. It just disturbed me when I look up. It was